So the next few stages is what the stages we call design, development, and construction. So in these stages, this is where you have agreed in terms of the concept with the client, but now it is time to turn all of these elements into realistic priced elements, right? Things like where you look at the structure of the building, where you look at the actual specification of certain things, whether it's the glazing, the flooring, and all the finishes that come on, that come along with it. This is where now you start to engage with the other consultants in our industry. This would be your electrical engineer, your structural engineer, whether it's mechanical, interior designer, all of these people. It's going to be dependent on the client, whether who he hires or who or she hires and for what purposes and what role they will play in a building. So for big commercial buildings, you would need all of the above. But for smaller homes, you'll find that the architect will actually take on the responsibilities of everyone else but the structural engineer. So we are not structural engineers. We need a structural engineer at all times. Maybe things like the drainage, electrical and mechanical things we can specify and we have a basic understanding of that. But structure, we have to employ the services of a structural engineer who then looks at our basic design, our concept, and then develops it structurally to make sure that it is it maintains its integrity and it is something that can be built structurally on site. In terms of the cost, the quantity surveyor is someone that also comes into the picture at this stage, and their job is basically to review all the proposals from the different consultants, whether it's the architects and the finishers, it's the electrical engineer and his lighting design and layout, mechanical guys and his air conditioning, the AC system, whatever he's proposing to put there, and the structural engineer. So he takes on all of that information and he goes and does a costing, a preliminary costing, and then a bill of quantities to then give the client a specific breakdown of what is going to be needed and what is required to then bring this building to life. And this also throws a spanner in the works if our budget is way above what the clients had initially wanted, and it may cause everyone to go review their design. Okay, so there are two ways in which the other consultants can be appointed. The client can appoint them on an individual contract directly to himself, where he is then liable to manage and their fees and their contracts and what work they do. And you guys just work together to coordinate and do the service coordination. Or you could be the principal agent. You as the architect can be appointed as the principal agent, which means that it is then your job to oversee all the other services and all the other consultants that are then on the team. And it is your responsibility to coordinate everyone and take the project to site for construction, and you will manage the whole process. So in that instance, you as the architect are also acting as the project manager of the whole building. I think once that stage has been completed, you finalize the technical drawing. In South Africa, there's a section where there's tender documentation. So the tender documentation is the documents that you put together with everyone's services being coordinated, the architectural drawings, and it's basically more of a schedule to tell the contractor what he's going to be building so that he can then cost on the project. So it specifies things like what kind of glazing you're going to be using, whether it's double glazing, aluminium, how much of it is needed. It specifies the kind of flooring and the construction of the floor or the slab or the columns and the concrete. It specifies the finishes in the building, whether it's tiled floors, polished concrete, bagged walls, plaster and paint, all sorts of things. So everything in the building basically is detailed and is scheduled with areas, quantities, and specific specifications from the manufacturer. So it will have the product name of whatever paint you are using, who's the supplier, what the color is, and what the name or the code on the specific product is. So all of those things form part of the design or the detail tender documentation that you put together, you give to a contractor, or the client takes those documents and then calls for tenders. So what that means is that he will call a bunch of contractors, maybe 4 or 5, and invite them to tender for this particular job. They will then look at the specifications that you as the construction team or the professional team have put together, and then they price on how much or on whether they're qualified to do this work and how much it would cost to then produce the work. The client then, if you are the principal agent, you and the client will sit together, go through the quotes from the different contractors and choose the contractor that is most viable or that's most suitable for your project. This is also dependent on his experience, his years of experience, his certification with the construction boards in South Africa. It's dependent on whether his price is good, so at what price he comes in, and then his time in which he says that he can deliver this project to within. So those things are very critical in choosing the right contractor. And once the contractor has been approved, you then take the building, you have a site handover and you take the building to site. So this is where now he's gonna get on site and he's gonna start with the foundations, and then he's going to do the superstructure, which is the walls and the columns, and then the roofing, whatever roofing structure it is. And your job in the stage, which is stage 5, is to then oversee that whole process. So it may require you to spend a couple of days a week on site, making sure that everything is being built according to your drawings, all your specifications are being followed, to also make sure that the site is kept sort of safe and neat and in accordance with the building regulations. And then in those times, the contractor or yourself and the client may have certain changes because, like I said, things don't always go, it's not like a straight line to the end. Sometimes changes, when you get on site, you thought something will look a certain way and it actually doesn't work, and you realize actually we can make this change at this late stage. So there is a bit of room for changes, but all of those changes are very costly. So sort of recommend not to do it, but it does happen. And when it does, you as the architecture team are going to be required to go back to the drawing board for certain elements, redesign, and do referral drawings, basically, for those particular areas. What then happens next is you see the project site in the different stages. The contractor will have a program as to how long he's going to do certain things, how long it's going to take him to do his foundation, his superstructure, his finishes, and the closing out. And then you have a process which is called snagging. So snagging is when the client or the contractor says to the client he has reached practical completion. He says that the building is complete in accordance with what you guys specified, and you as the architect take a walk around the building and you see and you oversee all the finishes and see if everything is done correctly and in accordance with what you design. So snagging, you'd put like a checklist of things that are still defects, things that aren't fixed, things were not done right, and the contractor would then have to go review and revise and fix all of those things before you give him a certificate for practical completion. So if it's let's say a structural mistake or a contractor's mistake where he put a wall where a wall's not supposed to be, the contractor would have to pay for that to be demolished, and the time it would take to then buy new material to rebuild it, and the time lapsed. If he said he's finishing by Friday, and by Friday we find that he's put a wall that isn't there, it wasn't in our plans, and he's put it there, it's at his cost that he's going to pay for that. But in situations where you had designed it a certain way and everyone thought, hey, a big full height window would be great in this position, but come to site and you realize that the sun is just unbearable and no one is going to be able to work or sleep in this room or utilize this room because of that, it will be a sort of a client cost, because you can present to him that this is actually not a good idea to have this here. We think that it'll be better to remedy this situation in this way. And that will just be a cost that is then taken up into the rest of the project. It won't be to a specific person. The problems come about in different ways. Sometimes it is a design sort of area or lack of foresight that causes it. Sometimes it might be structural. So it really depends. You can do all you can do in terms of like designing for the context and for the right position of the site. And you just have to go through sort of the list that I explained before, which is you'll look at the orientation, your light, your ventilation, construction material, and all of those things. You can go through down that list, and if you've covered all of those points, I think in terms of design integrity, you've done your job. But some things you just can't foresee, and they happen, and everyone has to work together to try to remedy that. So I think if you've just gotten the gist and the basis of design, you'll be fine. important for you guys to understand the end user. By that I mean everyone so we as architects are taught to design in a certain way, and we find certain things aesthetically pleasing, and we may try to push our own agenda of what we like as designers or what we've been taught at architecture school and what we see around the world wherever we travel, and you may want to just emulate whatever it is that you've seen and put it there. But you may find that the person or the position in which you're putting it in is not the right context. So be aware of who you're doing it for and try to find out what the users or the family actually wants and what they deem to be a home that brings them pride and joy and what they like. So I think sometimes we try to push our own agenda too much. Try not to do that. Try to listen to find out what it is that they like and what they deem aesthetically pleasing, and not try to do whatever dream design that you've thought of in however long you've been practicing architecture. Because I think we all do that. We all have an agenda that we want to push, which is fine if it's for a reason, but listen to what they want and listen to what they think is beautiful and what they think will bring them joy and pride and something that they can turn around and be proud of and be like, oh, this is my home and I wanted it to look like this and I'm excited about it. The home that you are designing, it is for a family that is in a particular sort of situation right now. But there's no telling where that family will be economically and financially in the next 3 to 2 years. So what you are trying to do is to build a basis or a foundation of something that can grow into something bigger and something more wonderful, and that's something that they will create themselves. So when you're designing, be flexible. Be flexible in what it is that you are putting on the table so that in future they can also adapt it into something else and into something sort of more beautiful and that caters to their ever-changing needs. Because if they've got a family of young children, those kids in 2 or 3 or 5 years may be teenagers or they may be adults and they may want to have their own space. So the kinds of spaces that you designed at the time for, let's say, a 3 or 2-year-old with a bunk bed and maybe it's like a shared room and a shared this and that may not be suitable in 5 years' time. So is there room to be able to adapt that into adding another room at the end so that the older brother can move out and he has his own space and the 2 young girls stay in the house or whatever it is? That's just an example. So I think adaptability is very important in your design, and it's not a finite structure, and the people do change and they do evolve and their needs change and evolve also. So be very aware of that. And then I think just try to be innovative in how you use the materials, that are very limited materials that we have. I think people in South Africa are very resourceful, and if you go to sort of what we call squatter camps or shanty towns, you actually realize how resourceful people are with just old sheet metal, with cardboard and the things that they're able to construct themselves, not being architects, but the kinds of spaces that they're able to make for themselves using the limited sort of trash or material that they find everywhere to build a home, and how you can then translate that architecturally and technically into something really beautiful. So don't be afraid to use what's around you. Don't be afraid to be innovative. Don't be afraid to look at what people are already doing in that area and improve upon that. So you don't have to invent the wheel. You don't have to bring them some new technology that they've never seen. See what they already have and just make it better. This is also just a personal take. This may not be true for everyone. I think, especially in the African community and having grown up in a township, if I had to build a steel and glass house, glass home, it'll look cool, but no one will really think it's like amazing or beautiful as such. Like we want structures that sort of symbolize like sort of permanence. Yeah, permanence is the word. Permanence, bold structure. We want concrete, we want bricks and mortar, and we want it at a big scale. So take that into consideration. And I know that us as designers are privy to all sorts of technologies and sort of very advanced sort of transformative materials that can be used. But if we are trying to put dignity for this context, they view that as something different. So something that's made out of sheet metal and steel and whatnot, to an average informal settlement dweller, that is considered another shack. It's not really considered a dignified home. They want a concrete and brick and sort of tiled roof home. And that would be considered something sort of dignified and to be proud of. So take that into cognizance when you are doing your design. Make your designs feel and look permanent and solid, and just have presence, and also give it the potential to be something bigger and better in future. So guys, I am really excited about the project that you guys are going to undertake, and I think you will learn a lot. You must be open to ideas, do your research, try to find as much sort of context and as many interviews as you can with people in this country and this continent, and what it is that they value and who it is that you're building for. And I think just be great, be innovative, be amazing, and we will love it. This is Nontokozo Mhlungu, also known as NT, and thank you for listening in on my lecture, and I hope this really helps you in your design journey.